Well, hello and happy Thursday to you. I hope that you're having a great week. It is always a treat to spend an afternoon with you. Now, let's start with the financial markets because, trust me, you're going to want to stay because we have an incredible panel of experts today leading our interview later today. So the financial markets, well, let's talk about the financial markets. The Dow closed up 52 points, the NASDAQ closed up 39 points. A lot of eyes continue to be on the next stimulus package wherever, and hopefully at some point it'll be here because Democrats have announced that the House is hoping to pass another $2+ trillion package. Whether or not that will happen, as you know, we talked about this yesterday. We do continue to receive information that President Trump's advisors feel that another package might not be that necessary to get this economy rolling and back underway. On other news, Amazon today announced a brand new, really cool, kind of crazy Ring drone, if you will. This new security tool that they announced from Amazon is actually going to circle around your house so that you can see what's going around your house to yet add another layer of security. On other trends, Target says that they are hiring another 130,000 Americans before the holiday season because the big trend, and I don't know if you've used this, but I'm a huge fan, curbside pickup. Curbside pickup is such a big deal. We also heard of the struggles happening with Amazon Prime delivery people and their woes at Whole Foods Market. But certainly we continue to see more online selling, and what that means also is probably even more attention on how we can reach that next consumer online. And lastly, New Jersey, unfortunately, many of you have heard this already, and if you don't live in New Jersey, I still want you to pay attention to this. New Jersey has announced that they are soon going to be increasing taxation for New Jersey's millionaires. Now, I don't think that's a surprise, but if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, well, I don't live in New Jersey, and I certainly do, but why it makes sense for you to pay attention to this, my friends, is because taxes are coming. I almost feel like, when we studied the American Revolution, I feel like right now we should be saying taxes are coming. Taxes are coming, and if it's not on your radar, definitely be on your radar. I'm going to continue to give you more tips and tricks and things that you should be monitoring tomorrow on how you can plan for more taxes, so we can get things underway. And as you know, today we are continuing to live stream today live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, as well as Twitch. So if you are with us, and I see many of you already jumping in, do you know we continue to monitor your comments and questions throughout this interview. But without further ado, the real reason you are here is because of these two incredible individuals. I am so excited. I actually reached out to them some time ago, and these are two leaders that I have been following, and I've had the pleasure of corresponding with on Twitter, and I call us friends. Let's introduce first Rachel Miller. Rachel is the global influencer marketing lead at the company SAP. Huge organization, as you know. Rachel, thank you so much, and welcome to the show. It's great to see you.
Hey there, happy to be here.
Well, where are you joining us from today?
I am in Fresno, California.
Oh, kind of toasty there today, isn't it?
Kind of toasty, yeah, but not on fire, which is most important.
Yay. Well, wonderful to have you here. And let's introduce also and welcome my dear friend, Mark Boothe, who is Director of Customer and Social Media Marketing for Instructure. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here.
Hey, my friend. Good to talk to you.
Well, I know this is, I know how busy you are. And in fact, you're not even at home right now. You're off site. So thank you for making this, because let me tell you, this is something that we want to learn from these two leaders. You guys are definitely like, if you were a superhero, I think you would have capes coming out right now, because when we talk about influencer marketing, I think many of us know, especially those of us who are corporate executives or running our business, we know how important this is, probably more than ever. The really sort of getting the word out about our business, the things that we're doing. I would love to start with you, Rachel, if you don't mind. When we talk about influencer marketing, one of the statistics that we saw actually from Top Rank Marketing's 2020 State of B2B Influencer Marketing Research Report showed that 96% of B2B marketers that engage influencers consider their program to be very successful. And Rachel, maybe you could talk a little bit about your role at SAP and how you utilize influencers there.
Absolutely. One, that's an amazing statistic, and I'm really proud to contribute to that number. And I think the most powerful thing about influencer marketing for B2B is it's that peer commentary, which carries so much more weight than a talking head from a brand. It's people who are boots on the ground, relatable to your target audience, and they're telling your story better than you ever could. And I think that's really starting to move the needle for a lot of B2B companies.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting because sometimes you think, well, if I run a business and I should be the talking head for my business, or maybe my employees should be, but it continues to see the importance of having a group of influencers lead this discussion. And Mark Boothe, I feel like you could write the book on this topic. Talk to us about this. Mark, maybe you can give us a little bit introduction on your history, your experience, and really what you're doing in Instructure right now.
Yeah, so I came from Adobe. I was there for about 11 years. I worked with some of the greatest influencer marketers around. Big shout out to Ronnie Monty, who Winnie knows really well, Monica as well, Matt Rose, and all the people over there who have helped build such an incredible program. And big shout out to Lee Ode and the top ranked team. If you need to do influencer marketing, those are the people to talk to. So what we did at Adobe is we built a program that was based on mutual friendship and mutual benefit. When we think of influencer marketing, I think it's so easy to think of LeBron James and Katy Perry, who are of course incredible. Anytime LeBron or Katy want to tweet about my company, I'm going to take it. But what I'm really looking for is people who are experts in their field, who relate specifically to my potential buyers. And that's what we did at Adobe. They've got one of the best influencer marketing programs around. And a lot of what they use are what we might consider micro influencers. It may not be people, all of them having millions of followers, but they have significant followings. And more importantly, they are experts in their field. We did that at Adobe, and I've done it over at Instructure now too with a great team. We work with people in the education space who are experts in EdTech, have a good name. Followers, I don't really care that much about how many followers they have. What I care about is real, true influence. And what we've seen is people like to hear from those who have real, true influence. So thus the need to really focus on influencer marketing.
Oh, I love that, Mark. So super helpful. Rachel, what do you think about this? When you work with influencers, how important is the number of followers? Or are you in the same area as Mark? You also are you more focused on engagement? How do you quantify the people that you want to work with?
Sure, I definitely have a sweet spot for what we're now dubbing micro influencers. These are typically accidental influencers. They're passionate about certain topics. They're incredibly knowledgeable. They're already creating great content. And when you partner with them, often like the two influences combine to make a really great campaign. So it's not a primary focus. Sometimes social footprint is a nice to have, but much like Mark said, we really focus on expertise. And those smaller folks tend to have highly engaged audiences, which really moves the needle.
So that's really interesting, Mark. I think, on social media today, we obviously, there's a lot of news that continues to dominate social media. And how do you weave through that? When you work with influencers, are you looking for a certain tempo? And are you looking for a certain cadence? What sort of stands out when you think about what makes a successful influencer for your program?
100% for me is engagement. I really, truly, and as funny as that might sound, I couldn't care less about how many followers somebody has. We've seen for so many years how easy it is to get followers. If you want to have a whole bunch of followers, come and talk to me. I could get you some overnight, I'm sure. What I care about is, do people who we really care about engage with the kind of content that we like? And so are they posting regularly? Of course, that's important. But even more important, when they post, are people engaging, and are the right kind of people engaging? That's what I really care about.
I love that. Actually, I had a discussion. So I have worked as an influencer for another group, and she said one of the things that she really pays attention to is also that voice of like the engagement, but also the positive voice, because she says, if they're positive and they get positive feedback, then they're going to bring my company to a better light. And I don't want to align with someone who's more controversial. Rachel, how do you feel about that? And is that not as important? Is it more important engagement, but also the type of engagement or what's discussed? Like, for example, are there certain things that SAP says this is off the table? I don't want someone who's too engaged in this and this and this area. Are there things like that you pay attention to?
Absolutely. I mean, we're all drawn to positivity, and I'd be lying if I said we didn't need a little bit more of that this year. And as a large company, we do look for red flags. There are tools that can help with that. There's a lot of manual effort involved. We definitely tend to stay away from people who are too political. That can be a hot topic. But generally, it's just people who are being proactive and starting great conversations. And then to kind of echo, it's like, who is engaging with them? Are they also our target audience? Because you can have someone who's talking about a topic, but if their audience isn't related to, the audience that we're pursuing, it's probably not going to be a perfect match. So there's a lot of deep diving into who is actually engaging, not just their engagement rate.
Okay, that's powerful. So not just engagement rate, but also who they're engaging with. Mark, so this leads me to ask you this. There's obviously risks whenever you do any type of marketing. And I certainly think in a time of influencer marketing, for a brand to decide to engage a micro-influencer or even a larger influencer, there's always inherent risks. In fact, I remember talking to an executive at a large auto manufacturer this a few years ago. And she says, we actually gave a vehicle to a really, A-list celebrity. That A-list celebrity did these terrible things, and now we're having the hardest time getting our car back from him, So maybe you could talk a little bit about the risk of a company engaging with influencers, some of the risks that you see, and maybe some things that have worked well for you to mitigate that risk.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to research. Do your homework beforehand. Influencer marketing is, I am totally bought in. Hook, line, and sinker, whatever you want to call it. I am so in on influencer marketing, but it takes work up front in order to find the right people to make sure that they're talking about the right things. Similar to Rachel, there are sensitive topics that we just don't want to engage in. Now, there's important topics that we will engage in, but there's some things that are just sensitive and very polarizing that we stay away from. So for us, that's a really big deal. How do I make sure that I've done my homework so that I can mitigate the risk of what could happen in the future? I mean, I've put influencers on big stages, and I haven't been let down for the most part. I haven't ever been let down to the point of I gave them a car and they won't give it back. So I guess I'm doing okay. But there have been times where maybe the relationship didn't go quite as well, and in that case, you learn and you move on. That has happened before, where I've had to have an influencer relationship end because it wasn't mutually beneficial.
Right. So I love this point. So Rachel, maybe you could give us sort of a big picture when you think about where influencer marketing performed very well for you. When you think of a scenario like that, what do you think were the characteristics of why it was successful? Were there certain things when you look back, you're like, we definitely have to do that again. These are the types of people we should be. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
I think just doing your research cannot be understated. I always like to say when I'm contacting someone for a project, I know the name of your pets. I know your dog's name's John, because we've done that level of homework. So we've mitigated almost all possible risks, and we want to make sure that it's a really good fit for you. I'm not going to approach someone who never does video work and like, hey, we're starting a video series that you want to be a host, because that doesn't make any sense. And there has to be an element of fun. We're collaborating. We want this to be an enjoyable, fulfilling project for all parties. And a lot of that just comes from taking the time and doing your due diligence. As Mark said, it's a lot of work up front to make a program successful.
I love that. And so I'm gonna ask Mark this question too, because Mark, I know you've seen the effects and benefits of working with the influencer groups that you've created at the different very large companies that you've been with. Maybe you could talk about what looks like a win to you, and maybe even a situation where you were sort of surprised just by how big it was, because I know that obviously you're like, obviously a superhero in this space, but where have there been surprises that even exceeded your expectation when working with influencers?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it all comes back to relationships. And I'll point back to Adobe. The very best of anyone I've ever seen do this is Ronnie Mani from Adobe. Those who are watching, if you don't know Ronnie, she is the superstar of all influencer marketing people. And the reason that she's so good is she is brilliant with relationships. And that's not contrived, it's real. And that's why we've been successful with our influencers over time, because it's almost like they're part of the family. I've worked with Winnie a long time. We've traveled to New York together. We've had some cool experiences at really cool places. But these people are not just like business relationships anymore. I mean, they're on the level of those that I have good relationships and have incredible results with time after time. It's people like Winnie that we've built a friendship. And I know what she's into. She knows what I'm into. We've had honest conversations. And that's when I think you see the very best results in media, on video, on social, and everywhere else, is when somebody can just be honest. They can be honest about who they are and what they're wanting.
It was, and I'm gonna share this more too, Mark. Is actually when we were, I think it was in New York, or no, it might have been when we were in Las Vegas for Adobe. In fact, the numbers that came out of this group that you and Ronnie set together, the amount of social engagement, I mean, it was like the moon exploded. It was incredible in such a short amount of time. And I know, Rachel, you're grinning too, because I know you do this at SAP as well. It's so incredible. And what I think is really refreshing and unique and really fun about it is, when we're put in the room with other influencers that, I'm going to be in a room with this person. These are people that you admire, that you look up to, that you've engaged with on social, but you put us in the room and creating that community. And what Mark said about making us like family, like literally, I just got a text from Ronnie this morning. It's like, there's that understanding, and we want to see your company succeed, because if your company succeeds, then that means we're doing what we need to do. And it also, most importantly, it benefits us as for our audience. Our audience loves it. And I'll share this interesting side tip on my side. I also have a very large tweet chat. In fact, the largest business tweet chat on social media. We average 150 million impressions per hour. And that actually is sort of a baseline that actually goes much higher than that. And I remember asking my community, I said, how would you feel? We've had a lot of brands reach out to us and say they want to sponsor our chat. How do you feel about that? Because I want to ask permission to be able to do that, because I want to honor the fact that our community, is most important. If you don't feel like this is good, you feel like I'm selling out, we shouldn't do that. And I was so surprised that they came and said, absolutely, we want to do this. We want to be part of this, and we're excited for you and want to see this grow higher. So for those influencers who are wondering if this is sort of a one-sided relationship, like Mark and Rachel have mentioned, it's certainly not. It's certainly great. In fact, Rachel, maybe you could talk about this. You work with a lot of influencers presently. So I'm not going to ask about compensation, because I think that's a very private and individual situation. What I'm going to ask you is, how do you make sure that they're getting something out of it? How important is that to you? How important is it to SAP when you engage an influencer?
It's incredibly important, because like what we're talking about, it needs to be mutually beneficial. It needs to be fun. Like, I want you to succeed. I don't want to pull you into a project where you're not going to do your best. And compensation is definitely part of that. It enables us all to live our lives. It's a necessary piece of the puzzle. But it doesn't always have to be monetary. I think that's something to keep in mind as well. But when you build a rapport with an influencer, and kind of like you and Mark, you have that relationship where you can have very candid conversations. You can ask, like, what would be an optimal scenario for you? And that's where you can come to agreements that really kind of make both parties shine.
I love that. So Mark, talk to me about social currency. We've heard about this word a lot, right? When you think about social currency in this sort of relationship with the brand and the influencer, who benefits most? And what's your goal, if you will, when you engage an influencer for the first time that you haven't met? Maybe if they were introduced to you, do you have an idea of what you love to establish long-term with them?
Yeah, and honestly, it varies depending on who the influencer is. But I think that the number one, again, like Rachel said, is it mutually beneficial for both parties? And that doesn't have to mean money is exchanged. Yes, that may mean that money is exchanged sometimes. I'm a fan of that. I'm not opposed to that. But I think you have to figure out. I had a really fantastic boss actually at Adobe back in the day who told me this at one point. She said, "Mark, find her yes." I was having some trouble with a certain individual, and it was really impressive and interesting for me to hear. That's right. Everybody has a yes. Everybody has something that helps their clock tick, whether it's money, whether it's engagement, whether it's hooking them up with the right people. There's something that helps their social world to keep ticking. And that's what you have to do with influencer marketing. You have to figure out what's valuable to them. Maybe it's relationships, and that's one of the things that I think Winnie would probably say with the relationship with Adobe is we've just been able to make such great relationships both with her and with other people that's a lot of the value is we're a giant team of happy Adobe fans at this point.
Yes, that's so true. And Mark, when I'm hearing you say this is finding their yes, that's really powerful, because I think about like I know many of us are parents here. I always think that if I can just find the yes for my child, each child is different, but every influencer is very, very different too. And our needs are very different, and I love that. Let me ask you this. I think this is a question that many of our audience is probably wondering is how does an influencer get on your radar? Rachel, if you could start with that. Like, obviously there's a lot of influencers, a lot of micro influencers, maybe doing certain things that maybe just aren't on your radar. How do they mindfully, if they're interested in working with an SAP, they're interested in working with Instructure, where do they go and how do they do this?
There's a lot of different ways. I mean, we're not lacking for platforms to create content on these days. I personally have a lot of alerts, everything from Google to a variety of tools, tracking conversations. And so new voices surface on the daily. And then the team and I will kind of do a deep dive. And is this someone who we love to work with? And then, I find out the name of the dog and then I reach out. But there's so many ways. I guess a tip for people out there who are wanting to work with certain brands, be proactive. I wish that would happen more. I know oftentimes I'm reaching out to people, but it would be great to have that on the reverse. I'm like, hey, I have this idea for a really fun, LinkedIn Live or whatever it might be. I think that would be really refreshing. So yeah, that's my tip for all you guys out there.
Okay, I'm gonna say that I'm thinking Brian Schumann right now is crazily taking notes right now, because Brian, did you hear Rachel just said LinkedIn Live, something interesting? Brian, I'm guessing you're hearing this. All right, well, definitely, Mark, we want your insight on this too. So obviously Instructure, we're talking education. What do people need to do to get on your radar?
Just start wherever it is that you are. If that means that you're into Twitter chats, if that means that you're into LinkedIn Lives, do something that will help us to notice you. Don't be shy. That's the least effective way to be an effective influencer marketer. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be an extrovert. What it means is that you need to be purposeful in everything that you do. If you're interested in working with SAP, guess what? I would start following Rachel significantly. Not in a creepy, weird way, Rachel, don't worry. I would see what she talks about. I would engage with her. Same thing with me. If you're interested in working with Instructure, I would see what's happening. What are people talking about related to Canvas? Who are the people who are really putting content out on a regular basis? And just start being that person. And I promise you that if you are, we'll notice you. We'll notice you.
I love that. And so I know Brian Schumann says, haha, yes, I did, because I know Brian, I know you, Brian. I know you're thinking this. These are like seriously like the superheroes of influencer marketing. The course is all about, what I love about this conversation is it gets to the heart of it. A lot of times people are trying to give you other opportunities. One thing I will say that every influencer wants to align themselves with brands that also elevate their own brand, right? Because it has to be in alignment. I was just approached recently by a huge company. I won't say exactly who it is, but we're trying to find alignment if it works. They're like, okay, well, it's not exactly on the financial side, but it could be on the side that you're a mom and this thing. So I think what I would love to hear from you is how is important is it that the influencer is very laser focused in one audience or one area? Do you prefer to work with influencers that are sort of more generalists, or do you prefer more of a focus? Rachel, your thoughts?
We work with both because I think there's a time and a place. Sometimes you're looking for someone to be very specific on a topic and be able to do a really deep dive on a highly technical topic. Other times, someone who's more of a generalist to carry the conversation. It really depends on the project. Both are incredibly beneficial and necessary for influencer marketing. And I think that's a key part of any program, is making sure you have all those boxes checked. And also there's the amplification standpoint. Generalists often have larger social footprints, and that also becomes very useful for certain types of campaigns.
Okay, great. And then Mark, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I totally agree. I love specialists and I love generalists. It depends on what the activity and the result is that we're trying to drive. I have right now, Winnie is a perfect example. Winnie's done some stuff with us on the instructor side. She has children. We're makers of one of the biggest education technology platforms around in Canvas. And I wouldn't say that Winnie is necessarily an ed tech specialist, but she is a mom, and a really good one at that, who cares about what her kids are learning about. And so in this case, Winnie would be considered a generalist for me. She has a very engaged following. And so that's a perfect example of generalist versus specialist. I've got teachers who are big time influencers for us, who are using Canvas on a regular basis. And so it just depends on what the need is.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Yes, and I will mention that all three of my kids use Canvas, and I find it to be very, very intuitive and user friendly, even down to my just turned 7-year-old. So that's a big win. I love this. This is so helpful. And I just want to say, I know we're not done yet, but I just want to say how much I appreciate you being honest and open about this. I know, that's always the goal, is when we do these sort of interviews, that we get to the heart and the meat and really those direct questions, because I know many people watching, number one, that are running their own business thinking like, I want to do this for my business, but I don't know where to start. And number two, many people who are really actively creating content and creating a name for themselves, not knowing how to get through the door and how to get noticed. So I think I'm hoping we accomplished both those things. So now we're going to do a really fun speed round, if you don't mind. For those of you who are watching, this is one of my favorite things. And those of you who watch every day, I want to tell you, I appreciate you so much. And I know you're like, this is new. Yes, this is new. We're doing loans for a second time. So let's start with Mark on this. Okay, Mark, best tip for a small company with an even smaller budget to get engaged in influencers. So small company, maybe 10 employees, maybe they're thinking they have this like amazing widget, but they need the word out. What do they do?
Start with just listening. There are influencers who are already out there that you probably don't know or you haven't recognized. So listen and then start acting. Start finding those Winnies, start finding those Rachels who are already saying great things about your brand, and that you could find some mutually beneficial relationship with that person to be able to help both parties.
I love it. Okay, Rachel, same question. Small company, small budget, need influencers.
I'm going to steal Mark's line. And once you've identified your influencers, find their yes. Because a mutually beneficial agreement doesn't necessarily involve a financial transaction. So I think once you find what makes them tick and get them excited about your why, so it's compensation is just a nice to have.
Yes, I love that. The why is so important. Compensation is definitely helpful. And I want to tell you, a thank you and just even engagement on a public forum is also always appreciated. So, all right, I love it. Question number 2, Mark. If I wasn't doing what I do today, I'd be.
I really like what I'm doing. I'm one of those people that I'm pretty happy to say I love my job. I love what I'm doing. If I wasn't, I probably would have gone back to my early days and decided I wanted to be like a professional tennis player or something. That would have been a few pounds ago, but that would have been fun. It would have kept me in better shape too.
That would have been fun, but some days it gets kind of sweaty. So I think Mark, you're really good at what you do. So I'm glad to hear you love what you do. Well, Rachel, tell me about you. So if you weren't doing what you do today, what do you think you would be doing?
Well, much like Mark, I love what I do. I get to basically talk to really cool people all day, and that's hard to beat. But in a former life, I worked in a kitchen in my early career days, and I would love to be a chef. I still think sometimes I am, but that would be something I would pursue for sure.
So then let me ask you this, and then so what's your best dish?
Ooh, probably carbonara.
My kids would pass out hearing that, because that's a hard dish. I feel like that's a really hard dish. That egg throws you off every time. All right, Mark, I would love to meet blank one day.
Oh, Winnie, this is the hardest question you've asked me, I think, ever, to be honest. I think there are so many. I like positive, I like inspirational people. And so I don't think I could pick one, but I'd probably go with one of the three. Gandhi, never a bad choice. Mother Teresa, also a fantastic choice. And Jesus. One of those three I feel like would be really good choices for me.
Okay, I think you have three winners there for sure. And those, I would love to make the three of them as well. And Rachel, so same question for you. And you're welcome to say more than one if you want to, but I would love to meet.
I'm going all in on Michelle Obama. I think she's an incredible inspiration for many reasons. So, and I think I can make it happen because she's alive. So.
She's alive, and talk about powerhouse influencer of all time, right? Didn't they just vote her, Rachel, like the most influential woman on the planet? In fact, I read this, Rachel, it's funny, and I know you saw this too, is they're volunteering Michelle for everything. It seems like they wanted her to run for president, and then they wanted her for the Supreme Court as well. I think it was this week. So I think you had said that, I guess she's a woman of many talents.
She really is. We need to clone her because I think she would be awesome in all of those roles and cure cancer. So.
Yeah, and cure cancer. And it'd probably be great for Instructure and SAP, I think, right? Maybe?
I am on Team Michelle. Bring it on.
So, Team Michelle, if you're watching this, I think, these two people, these two very amazing, wonderful superhero people, by the way, might want to take your call. So thank you. I can't even begin to thank you all for joining us. Mark and Rachel, this has just been such a treat. I've learned so much and just being here, and so thank you for honoring us and sharing all that you did. And just a quick thank you. Want to also give a quick 5 shout. Kelly Hungerfer, we love you. Want to say thank you for being here. The amazing Brian Schumann, who I call really legendary on LinkedIn. All things LinkedIn learning, LinkedIn live, just LinkedIn, period. And so many get it here. I see so many of you, so I'm going to stop right there and just say, join me again tomorrow. Because tomorrow, as you know, is always special. Tomorrow is Ask Winnie Something. And we have so many financial questions that have come in, and money questions, and just life questions. In fact, from this week, I don't even know how we're going to get through it. We'll probably be going on for hours. No, I'm kidding. It'll still be our normal time, but you definitely want to join us because we've got incredible questions. So join me tomorrow, Friday, 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern, wherever you're joining me from today. You're going to join me again tomorrow, I really hope. But most important, let's give a great, huge thank you once again to the one and only Rachel Miller and Mark Boothe. Before we let you go, where can we continue to follow you? Where do you prefer your engagement, Rachel?
Twitter was my first social love. I'm probably the most active there. I just love that it's so fast-paced and the candid conversations. So definitely follow me on Twitter at Rachel Lou Miller.
Great. So if you want to reach out and engage with her, now you know where to go. Mark, what about you? What do you prefer?
Same thing. I'm a huge lover of Twitter, at Mark Boothe with an E.
Okay, so if those of you are watching, if you are wondering where you should be, let me just tell you, for business, I'm telling you, Twitter is definitely a place to be, as well as LinkedIn. You can also follow them and certainly keep engaged. And do me a favor if you don't mind. Give them both a follow. Say hello. Don't be a stranger. And, definitely embrace them and celebrate them because they've been so generous with their time and their knowledge. And I hope, again, that this was helpful as we get through this pandemic together, as you build your business wherever you may be. Stay safe, stay well.